Okay, I'm Braema Mathi. I'm here in US as a global fellow on the Keene State College and the Outreach Institute for Peace and Reconciliation. I'm here for a semester on their Holocaust and Genocide Studies program. And I'm here now in Binghamton as a practitioner in residence. Both sides, I'm gaining a lot in both theoretical knowledge on genocides, atrocity crimes, crimes against humanity, war crimes, because I think over at KSC, quite a bit of structuring and case studies we are doing, and some regions that I have read about but do not know much about, really more depths, like Africa. I'm really appreciating that. And over here, I'm very much stimulated by the participation of the students and the lecturers in creating an environment where we are interacting on a common topic that all of us want to engage more on. I just came out a few minutes ago from about an hour or so discussion with some year one students, some majors and some minors, I suppose. I like the kind of breadth and depth of questions that they are asking, because I think the most important thing in all of this is the thinking process must begin, and then it will go into a deeper level if you so wish to progress, or maybe just keep the knowledge or progress further in this issue. So why am I on this topic? Because I have done a lot of different things on women's rights, on migrant workers' rights, HIV, and human rights sequentially, and some have also overlapped. In all of it, what I am more and more is that the underlying thing is human rights, the conceptual understanding of human rights, the dilemmas in trying to observe human rights, to be able to protect the philosophical, conceptual approach to ensuring that human rights administered well so that people can be fulfilled on their rights, I've realized is one of the toughest areas. We all like to use the word human rights for countries that are more open, but how do we engage? How do we protect? How do we promote? And how do we, like, if someone is really down and out, how do we ensure? I think these are our dilemmas. Something that I did long ago, I'm a literature major, and I love it. I will love it forever, because I think books and poetry and films, they all come under one ambit for me. They open up so many windows to how people live their lives, and you read something, you don't just close the chapter and walk off. We tend to do it with non-fiction sometimes, but fiction, if it resonates with you, it remains with you for a long time. And I found that when I did my master's course on something that I got involved in, and in a degree program on African American literature, and I embarked studying Toni Morrison really well. I did more than I should, but because I like it. And also I did an interdisciplinary approach on my own, individuation within a context of African American historical experiences and present day context. This whole issue of being marginalized, being made vulnerable, where your identity is taken away from you, has resonated for a long time. So my pathway is through different thematic focus, arriving somewhere in human rights, and then seeing the impact of total eradication of communities, of individuals. Historically, we still repeat it. We will sadly continue to do it. And I think our instruments are getting better. We have the Genocide Convention. We have the ICC, the International Criminal Court. We have now R2P, responsibility to protect. So now we are in a phase where can we execute effectively? I think that's the biggest challenge. We got many tools, but how do we bring it together and not run after the problem?
So can you talk a little bit about where you're from
Yeah.
and your work, both past and present, and how it relates to the prevention of genocide and mass atrocities and the promotion of human
Right.
rights.
I'm from Singapore, and I've worked as a teacher, a journalist, a researcher in senior management, corporate communications. I think, as you know, I like to move, and alongside quite a number of years, plenty years in on issues that I care a lot about, which is the women migrant workers and all that I've gotten involved in. What I found that in Singapore, uh, protection is good, security is good, human rights. In terms of civil liberties and all, we really need to work harder to make sure that we are addressing it and letting people uh, express themselves with fewer restrictions, moving slowly progress to more and more freedom, that we also know how to reconcile when someone says something that we do not agree with. It doesn't mean that it goes into good and bad camps or war or disruption, chaos and peace camps. We live every day of our lives with this kind of situations. So we cannot go and put all these artificial constructs all the time in a zealous effort of overprotection. So the contrast from where I come is the region of Southeast Asia. Some of the histories in how countries have become independent, including Singapore, we have had intra conflicts, civil rights based on race, based on religion, and some have become more severe over the course. Some countries still today are in a constant state of conflict, and there are measures, usually using military approaches, to ensure that some levels of peace are maintained. But this, I feel, is a combustible issue. Any day, anytime, anything can erupt. So educating people on building up, we all live with adversity, in adversities, with adversaries, so to speak. How do we develop a reconciliation approach within ourselves, that when something hits you, you do not become reactive? You also learn how to develop coping skills. I think that is very crucial. That, to me, is the best form of ensuring that we do not erupt into huge conflicts that destroy a lot of us individually, killing off people whom we love, or destroy buildings, etc. And then we do the work of the preventive approach. To me is very important, but usually we do not have the luxury. We have to run after what has happened, and how do we build some level of peace and reconciliation? I think that's very tough. It has been at the back of my mind for a very long time, because I come from a country where we don't have such severe issues. So we are very lucky, but we are also maintaining it by by imposing restrictions, laws. The Religious Harmony Act, I must remember the act quite carefully by name, which means that if you talk offside, then it can become a charge you have to face legally. But it cannot always be the legal approach. It's important, but it has to be more of the education, talking, building up mediation, negotiation skills, etc. So that is why I went for a mediation course, so that I become a little bit better qualified in this approach of how do you deal in tough situations, in bringing people to see each other's perspective. Because I do think at the end of the day, we all have the we can become bad and cruel and everything else just like that, but at the same time we can also just like that become a good person, in the sense of, yeah, I don't have to do that, I can do this, go this way, or be in a neutral camp, but neutral for a long time, not addressing what assails you and brings about conflicts, is not a good situation for the long term. So that is why I felt that I have a weakness. I'm not well structured in uh, genocide, what is genocide, definition, and all. What do we mean by atrocity crimes? I'm biting around, and so this is my involvement from last year to this year, that I become more, I get immersed more deeply into it, and hopefully I want to go back to my part of the world region and build up, work with other communities to build up greater awareness raising. It doesn't mean we are at a zero-sum game. There are civil society groups that are focused nationally, but I do think we need to build a stronger regional approach, because it's very hard. If your national process fails, you must have a very good, strong regional thing to come back. It's bases, huh? Building up. It's like a bit like a baseball, isn't it? We build up bases so that you strengthen your position to maintain the game of peace.
So the largest regional system that exists right now within Southeast Asia is the ASEAN system.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what ASEAN is, how it functions, and how you think about the relationship between ASEAN and international human rights
Yeah.
right now?
Okay. ASEAN stands for Association of Southeast Asian Nations, right? One thing that I think, as an aside, you need to know when you move within ASEAN is we have loads of acronyms, and then you're like, what does that stand for, and this and that? And just to let you know, so better have the glossary. We have to build up our glossary. That's the first thing. It has developed in the first place of countries coming together to build up economic wealth for the region. Individual countries benefit and the region becomes an attraction. Over the years, it has multiplied its roles, plentiful. In fact, I think it has moved very fast in the multiplicity of roles, and security also takes a lot of center stage. International humanitarian law, that was a little bit on the fringes, because it depends on whether the country, yeah? Now it has really come on board, and that's a very positive sign that the countries in Southeast Asia have got many natural disasters that take place within countries, whether it's cyclone, earthquake, whatever. And therefore, the international humanitarian law is taking on a bigger role within the legal fraternity, more discussions in academia, in training lawyers, and all that in the applications of the international humanitarian law. Defense is there. The different ministries, their representatives are also getting engaged, and there's a regional approach to it, so that we don't wait now who's going to go. As a region, we can support each other. I think that's fantastic. Likewise, an ASEAN charter was formed. This is very important, because before we all came together, we are cooperative and collaborative. We need a rules-based approach based on certain fundamental principles. That is how the ASEAN charter was born. That is also great news. Within the charter, we have Article 14, which categorically states that an ASEAN human rights body needs to be formed. So because of the charter and because it's rules-based, an ASEAN human rights body has been formed. So all progression. All these are very good things. We have representatives from each of the 10 countries to the ASEAN human rights body. And at the national level, all ASEAN countries have ratified some core conventions. The common conventions: CEDAW on the elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, CRC, Convention on the Rights of the Child, CRPD, Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities. 3 common laws. So nationally, you have to get your laws going, constitutional amendments, whatever that it takes. And therefore, then you can have support structures, you can have legal frameworks, etc. This is an ongoing process. Regionally, more and more is happening. These are very good things. However, not all ASEAN countries, I'm going from international to region to national back to regional, that not all ASEAN countries have ratified the core conventions on the IECPR, the Civil and Political Convention, and on the Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights Convention. Not all countries, Singapore too. We haven't. These are core primary human rights things. So when this becomes crucial, when we start talking about fulfilling the rights of people, because a human being is to be treated with equality. A human being needs to have their civil and political liberties. And we need to learn how to cope with another person's freedom if it impinges on my freedom. That's a coping mechanism and support structures and all that. But we don't, in some of our countries, the first year is not there. There are restrictions placed in an overprotective measure. So when it comes to human rights and what the human rights body can do, it is again curtailed quite a bit by a charter principle, Article 2E, which says that we need to maintain the national sovereignty of the country, which is good, primary. All countries don't want everybody barging in, which is fair and understandable. But because it's under the rules base, it can be cited by each and every 10 country of the 10 countries to say that is an infringement on my sovereignty. This becomes hugely problematic under severe human rights violations. For example, something that is intentionally done to eliminate a group of people, or even if you don't eliminate, you violate their human rights in horrendous ways by killing, etc. So other ASEAN countries will find it difficult to say we want that shouldn't be done, please pull back. Even responsibility to protect as a preventive first pillar will be difficult. So there are limitations that on severe human rights violations. I think this is the struggle. Therefore, as someone who's engaged on human rights, this is the dilemma that we face.
A lot of your life has been working in the civil society sector, but you've also served as a member of parliament in Singapore. Can you talk about what some of the challenges and opportunities that exist in both of those sectors? What were you able to do as an MP that you weren't able to do in civil society, and vice versa?
Okay. That's a bit of an interesting question, to compare the two fields. There's a whole phenomena of timeliness here that I think when I went into parliament, not as an elected member, I'm not with any political party, as a selected member of parliament. Therefore, I have a neutral, it's up to me how I wish to engage. And because I had come from the women's rights and I was engaging on the migrant workers' rights, these were the two pertinent things that I looked at. And therefore, there were issues that I was able to, and I was a former journalist, so my expose on many issues that affect the people of Singapore, and I was a community correspondent. So you're watching and seeing a lot of realms of how people in society are operating, the limitations by policy, the enhancement of programs that need to take place, the groups that we should look at, and all that. So I went in armed with quite a lot of information, and therefore I had built up a long list of almost like all the things I would like to address. And what I did was I strategized all the issues that I want to push forward. And so for every parliamentary session, I was speaking either on the bills that were being tabled and in the bills, I'm looking for areas, affected parties, and raising awareness. So that I think, is in its own way a form of advocating for what you are really doing in civil society. There's a complementariness. But within Parliament, it's more direct. You are talking directly to the members, you're talking to the minister in charge, and immediately you get a response. Usually the response is a rationalization of why it cannot happen, or sometimes we will look into it and it happens maybe even a few years later. But I feel the most important process that is also available for all of us as parliamentarians is the informal environment. You are mingling with your ministers in a more free manner, and you could directly approach them and say, and you don't always have to like, here, I want to table this issue, because then everybody's backs are up. You could talk informally and sometimes put in suggestions, and if the minister is more open, they engage on it and they will raise a consideration that you didn't think about before. So I think that opens up a lot of spaces, right? So that is good. The other third part to it is, because you have this parliamentarian position, the community wants to engage with you more openly, and rather than as a CSO representative. So there you find avenues to talk, to build up dialogue discussions, to talk about like CEDAW. When I first began my work on CEDAW, not many people even knew what is that CEDAW. Today it's better and better. And when you introduce using that position, that CEDAW is very important. You are building up higher collateral space for yourself, etc. And I think all those are the very good things. The other part of it is, because you also become a more publicly known figure. It's like a fast escalation. Journalism is already you're a publicly known figure, and then Parliament, it moves faster. Then I think when you make certain suggestions to the community, because it's tiered, and it cannot be just, hello, I talk to you, minister. The community people have to be in it. I think you get involved in discussion posts, physical or in just offline. I think all these are very important. So post Parliament, after your stint in Parliament is over, it has a continuum of a few more years where your space becomes wider. For me, I felt that once I embarked on human rights work, the space shrunk, because we there is an inbuilt response, I think, to human rights. First, the understanding of it. Many of us actually are observing rights of other persons without even knowing that we are doing it. But the word human rights puts a person's back up. And I think the other side of it is also, do I really want to entangle myself in this, and then what if I believe in it but I can't commit. So I found that not that I didn't know it would happen, but I thought, it's quite a limited space. Yeah.
Do you think that response is something characteristic of the region? Is there still a view of human rights as an imperial project in Southeast Asia?
Right. I think this thing will go beyond Southeast Asia to Asia. And even the West, I'll call the other side all West, because I don't know where to put Africa now, or Latin America. But when it's convenient, both sides tend to use it, the West and the East, and sometimes it becomes West and Asian. But human rights is universal. It's a 1948 declaration, Vienna in 1993. All countries who were already independent nations made a commitment to the Vienna Declaration. And at the time, you believed as an Asian, whether you are Western or whatever, you believed, and you cannot now tell us, especially in stable governments like mine. Singapore has got a stable government, that you backtrack and put it all into the camp of the West. And when you go through, that's one part. I feel that a lot of it becomes convenient use of the words and quite divisive in its own way, because whenever for economic modeling, it doesn't matter whether it's East or West, we are all looking for good examples, right? And therefore, I think that is the way we need to approach, right? But when you take a deeper look and analyze the 30 articles of the UDHR, most of it are functional, that can be applied. Most of it resonate. This is what we all want for ourselves. And whenever they say individualism, which is the common thing, and not community, I say look at Article UDHR Article 28, which cites community. You have to have a responsibility in the community. The way we are moving in the world now, individualism and community are together. What perhaps are some ways that have made people move? My individual rights override community, supersede community. I think that is where the community and I are together. I have my private space, but I cannot really walk alone in solitary. I work with the community. In the workplace, I work in a community. Socially, everything is community oriented. And I think for our part of the world, which has been very focused on community, it is also good for us to know the individual private space. And I think this is a good thing that is happening for us to find our medium in operating between the two worlds. That is how I think we need to operate. And I think if we look, one last point on this, if we look, I'm not an anthropologist, but this work is bringing me to reading our past histories, and our communities were all more together before borders, which is geographical, which is economical, which is colonized history, how borders were drawn, that in our more together environment, we were learning how to live more as communities. So I think we need to recover part of the positivities of those years and bring it back into our world. And the other part that is also giving us more connectivities is the virtual world, the internet. The internet has its huge pluses and it has its huge minuses. And therefore, we need to know how to deal with all of this and not build up huge divisiveness. It's hard work.
Thank you, Braema.